Off you go.
Okay, hello Stefan. How are you today?
Hey, I'm great. Thanks. How are you?
Great, great. Happy to have you on this reboot podcast for an episode that will be very corporate, but we'll try to speak also about global issues and how they are intricated with corporate world. Anyway, to start with a classic question, can you please briefly introduce yourself and tell me about your role at Salesforce and how you got there?
Yeah, happy to. Happy to. Name is Steffen. I'm based in Germany. I live near the Frankfurt region with my wife and kids, and I work, as you say, for a company called Salesforce. So we provide basically software to help companies manage their businesses, if you will. And sustainability is a key component of that, and it will become more and more important. And that's what I'm focusing on pretty much exclusively. So I lead our sustainability advisory team for customers that focus on sustainability-led and tech-enabled transformation. So think about sustainability management from carbon accounting, reporting, like all the rather dry stuff over to really performance management. Like how can you determine what your forecast for decarbonization is? How can you define corrective actions? How can you measure the impact of these actions, collaborate with stakeholders, and in the end, marry all of that with your business processes as well, be it sales, service, marketing, operations. So that's what I'm after, and that's like really a dream role to be frank, because that's it's really marrying sustainability with tech with transformation, which is kind of different components of my past so far. So I am my background is in environmental economics, worked for a species conservation foundation before, and then went rogue a little bit, like working in tech for the past 15 years. First, very infrastructure heavy, then moved into software, and always with that flavor of transformation. So first 5 years bringing customers into the cloud, second 5 years bringing customers from analog to digital business models, and now the
Mhm.
past 5 years really were about how can companies implement technology that's going to help them um, managing their sustainability performance more with more intent, I'd say, and make better decisions on their business models and operating models.
Okay, well, we're going to take the time to dive into this. So I want to set a little bit of context first. I mean, we're seeing a lot of mixed signals globally these days. And a couple of years ago, we had many companies that were very vocal about their ambitious corporate social responsibility, basically CSR. And they were talking about nature and climate and sustainability plans, and often under different labels, if you will. And there were widespread commitments to net zero targets, and regulations also in the US and the EU and even China, seem to be moving forward. However, the context has changed rapidly these days, especially now that, President Trump in the US is clearly and swiftly working to dismantle any reference to climate change and CSR initiatives, and has withdrawn from the Paris Agreement again. And even in Europe, we have the CSRD, which is also challenged, and some companies are simply dropping their, what used to be ambitious plans. I would like to get a few words from you on this context. How do you interpret this context? And would you say this is a kind of temporary phase, or is it a deeper transformation?
Well, that's a tough question to answer, right? But what I see here is with the companies that I work with, I can echo your observation. So there are a set of companies that are dialing back on their commitments. They're dialing back on their focus on sustainability performance, if you will. Also dial back on investments in that space. So that's what I get from conversations as well. And that might be due to the shifting focus from, say, sustainability regulation due to quote unquote competitiveness, right? Especially in the EU area. There is, however, and that's like a positive signal for me, a set of companies that I've met and speak to that are in sustainability management, not for the sake or not anymore, for the sake of being compliant to regulations that would depend on, CSRD and all the others. Companies that said, look, we learned an awful lot over the last past year, specifically preparing for CSRD. So we learned so much about our impacts, our risk, our dependencies between um, our company and our supply chain and nature and climate specifically, that we understand it's not for the sake of regulation we should care about this, but even if we remain in that paradigm we're in right now, so business based on nature instead of business as part of nature, even within that old paradigm, it's a matter of business resilience to have a very strong understanding of what nature means to us and our impact on nature is. Just think about supply chains, right? You got to know what kind of materials in your supply chain are prone to become scarce. You think about your locations, the physical risk of, say, rising sea levels, etc. Your data centers built in water-stressed areas. There's like a huge dependency, obviously, between the two. And but again, the positive sign for me is that there are companies that have undergone this increased knowledge about it, also with hiring people that know about nature, that know about climate, and building up new processes that bring sustainability into various departments, finance, operations, etc. So that is like a positive signal that I have. On the other hand, yeah, I would welcome if it would be also guided by regulations or by incentives that would also, motivate other companies to continue this path.
Hmm. Well, sure, the context matters, right?
Yep.
So, but let's stay a little bit on this because we the different COPs, showing limited progress, and as we said, major companies missing also their mission targets or even simply dropping it. What's your assessment, to be a bit more precise, on where we really are in terms of corporate ecological transition? And would you say that companies can adopt their climate and nature strategy to this context? What's the conversation like?
Well, cops, the recent cops haven't been providing much progress, right? I mean, we are all on the same page that like we need to collaborate across companies, across sectors and industry, but then we need to get stuff done. So I'm thinking, how can we get businesses back within planetary boundaries, which we're crossing for most of them, and that's a big conversation. So how can we bring corporations there? And it's like a multifaceted conversation. How can we allocate capital the right way? How can we shift from patterns that we're all used to, like overconsumption, like linear economy? How can we change all of that? And how can we phase it into an approach that's actually tangible? And to me, like personally, again, from background of economics, I look at things at for example, the UNEP report that comes out every year on the state of nature finance, and you see that you have a nature finance gap of 7 trillion US dollars that go into activities that are harmful for nature from the private and the public sector globally. And we have 200 billion US dollars that are flowing into nature positive activities. That's every year. And that's like makes it um, pretty tangible what needs to happen, right? So these kind of financial flows need to shift, and that is where both corporations, but then also banks and central banks can lead the way and must lead the way. There needs to be a concerted action between all of those parties.
And do you see major differences in that context, in that prospect, between the US, EU, and China right now? Because obviously in the US, we know what's happening, and it's difficult for a lot of companies, I guess, because they are kind of swimming against the against the current. And in China, the context is a bit different. In the EU too, in the EU too, like, do you work with these different geographies, and how do you see that?
Yeah. Well, I'm working for US companies, and part of my team is residing in the US. So we got a lot of customer interactions there. And as I'm sitting in Europe, we also have like a lot of clients here we talk to. I'm not so well versed with the Chinese region or with the Asian region, but speaking between like on US and the EU. Um, Well, maybe starting with us as a company, like we at Salesforce, we're not dialing back on any of our commitments around climate, around nature. We have an anti-climate action plan. We set up a nature positive strategy. We are working with TNFD. We're working with the LEAP process to understand our impact on nature. And we are very vocal about it as well. We're very vocal about the impacts, risk, and opportunities of between sustainability and AI. Um, DE&I, like diversity, equality and inclusion, we're not dialing back on that, and we're just one example where like political shifts in political landscape don't really matter. Say, and then in the EU, um, again, like I would see sustainability is regarded by many companies not anymore as just a matter of regulation or reporting. It is regarded actually as a mean of competitiveness. And if it's like in the EU right now, everything is like um, labeled under it needs to be competitive and it needs to be less bureaucratic. Well, yeah, but then in the end, if you do not know, or you won't have that sustainability data about your business available to understand risk, impacts, opportunities. How would you be able to make better, especially longer term decisions about your company? Right? That is going to be like a huge and hugely important input into corporate decision making. So I would foresee that regardless of what's happening, like on the communications level or the regulations level, companies will come to the point where they see there is no sustainability strategies. There only is a sustainable business strategy. And if you want to be around as a company for longer term, you have to embrace sustainability and you have to understand more about it.
Well, let's get into the what you do. Like the impact measurement, and we can get into the details because to understand what Salesforce does. We talk a lot about carbon, and it gets a lot of our attention. But we mention it also in this podcast a lot. There are other things like waste and water. And I would like to understand, how do you help companies develop a more comprehensive view overall, as a business of their environmental impact, and what are the big questions around measurement?
Yeah, that's a good one. I mean, if you're a buyer in this space right now, it's very hard to navigate this, right? You got many solutions and products that help you manage carbon footprints, etc. But then again, to your point, what's the bigger picture, right? One is a more comprehensive picture on your environmental footprint or your impact on the environment. That, of course, is carbon. But carbon is relatively easy, right? Think about well, waste is also you follow the streams of products. Is it going to be recycled, upcycled? Where's what waste is produced and where does it land, right? You can track that as well. Water footprints, similarly, like we all do that today. Like the new frontier, which is incredibly more complex, but then also more interesting, like from a technological point of view, is measuring biodiversity, for example, measuring impact on ecosystems, because that's a measure that's not global like CO2 equivalents. It is very local, it is very specific, and it requires a new set of data, frankly, right? And that's what we're looking at right now. So how can we bring that onto our platform as well? You got a lot of tools out there like Encore, like iBat, and others that help you do that today. And how can we bring that not only in a single, say, cockpit for corporations, but then also how can we help them take action on that data? And that's a completely new or like an elevated discussion to have. One is integrating the data. Second is understanding the consequences or the insight of that data, taking action and understanding what corrective measures you could possibly do to increase the positive impact, decrease the negative one, and yeah, and also make that data and information available to not only your sustainability team, but across the enterprise, to finance, to operations, to IT.
Mm.
I think that is an emerging pattern that I see that we do on the platform.
And how do you do that? Because I know, for example, you've developed a kind of innovative approach to measure scope 3 emissions. beyond the traditional spend-based methodology. Maybe we can take this as an example. Can you explain how that works with suppliers to get more accurate data? What are the hurdles, the challenges, and what are the lessons other companies could learn from your experience?
Yeah, the Scope 3, that's one of the CSO I talked to lately, he called it like his personal data dragon, right? Moved from scope 3 spend-based data to direct supplier data. That is what we did internally at Salesforce as well, because like maybe worth mentioning that we are our own customer in that regard. So we built that solution that we're using. We call that in Zero Cloud. We use that. We built it like 5 years ago for our own team, right? We are our own customer, and we're running on that as well. And so what we did was we started off with like every company possibly this does with scope 1, 2, added scope 3 with the spend-based approach, so basically taking procurement data, most accurate emission factors, and factoring that in to get the CO2 equivalents. Now, we have also a set of really cool colleagues that work on the decarbonization of our supply chain. So they did a lot of programmatic work with our suppliers. For example, they launched a sustainability exhibit, which is an amendment of our supplier contracts globally that says that our suppliers are asked to set science-based targets on decarbonization. They need to report on it, and they need to have that reports verified and assured externally. So for smaller suppliers, we even take over, credits for EcoVadis assessments, etc. Do a lot of enablement, do a lot of empowerment. But then again, how can you track the progress of decarbonization if you're only using spend-based data? That was like the big question that we had. And answer is you can't do very much. So you need more accurate data, at least for the biggest chunk of your suppliers. And that is then where we broaden the scope, or our internal team also broadens the scope from only working with a carbon management solution and looking towards how can we add that data integration platform that we have into the mix. That is really where it made a huge difference, where we're able to pull primary data from our suppliers, transform the data so that you have like a unified data set that applies to your own data model that you can then use, and you have like near real-time data, or at least say more accurate and more timely data available. And the result of that was that we could actually now for the first time see the results of our suppliers acting according to that sustainability exhibit. So we could see that there were measures taken to bring down their own emissions, and it would flow up or trickle down, if you will, to our balance sheet. It would actually decrease to have we have more accurate data from them.
And how do you make sure that the data is not greenwashing? Basically, how do you make sure it's transparent, it's verifiable, and is it actually impacting your product offering somehow?
So, running in the assurance of that data, that is something that's very important for us, especially for the top tier suppliers. So having that data assured by an external company, that is a requirement that we have, and that is basically reflected also in our offering as well. So if you think about that carbon accounting, carbon management solution, reporting solution, of course, it needs to be verifiable, it needs to be assurable, that needs to be accessed by a third party auditor, for example. So we have different ways to do that. So one is that we have basically it's a different set of permissions and roles that you can assign to your third party auditor, and they could basically work on your instance of Net Zero Cloud, and they could look into the data. They could look into what kind of emissions factors have you used, where does the data come from, are there any data gaps, and if so, what are the data gaps? Like, are there any is there data missing for energy consumption in specific months or so? So they could all see that, and we also like added more and more functionality to it because we've seen an increasing interest in also audit firms in this kind of solution. so that you can also extract the data from the solution. If you're a third-party auditor, you can then import that raw data into your own tool if you have one, and to really slice and dice the data as you see fit. So that's all like is meant to support the need for transparency, and is meant to support understanding where the data comes from and how solid it really is.
And I guess we're gonna jump into AI because this is one of the big topic of the days, and for good reasons. First, I want to understand at Salesforce, is it revolutionizing something? Like I guess that you have a lot of people working on AI, how to implement it in your data analysis, etc. But what's the approach there?
Well, let's maybe for us, for the listeners, like let's determine what we think
Yeah.
about when we say AI. So like one AI, we all know that's maybe predictive AI that's been around for, I don't know, 10 years or even more. That's basically applied statistics, if you will. That's giving you recommendations based on, machine learning, analysis of past patterns, and giving you suggestion on what to do next. And then the next wave was generative AI, actually producing content. So we bake that into our product as well, where like you have a support for drafting reports, qualitative responses to say CSRD or different ESIS based on the data that you have on the platform. It's helping you, it's assisting you, but then again, it's not a game changer really. What is the game changer in my book, at least, is like what we've seen in 2024 last year, when agentic AI came up. So AI agents that are able to um, perform complex multi-step tasks, either in assistance to a person when prompted, or even autonomously when triggered by an external event. So that is completely new topic, and like we are working on that agentic AI layer across the Salesforce platform, so across different departments that we have in sales, service, marketing, but then also sustainability. And there's a lot of new innovation coming from that angle, seeking to extend all those sustainability teams out there that are stretched thin in terms of staffing and have to work especially on tasks that are prone to number crunching. And that is what we want to help them with. Like, get over with this number crunching, with doing the data management yourself, providing insights and data to other departments. Like, that could an agent do for you. You don't have to do that yourself.
Well, it's changing everything, right? It's changing how we approach everything, and I think it's just the beginning. But there is a big questions related to energy and the impact that AI will have. And there is this we can frame this question this way, which is, will AI help reduce emissions somehow, or in the end, will it be just a net increase, in demand? And I know that you deeply involved in both sustainability and technology. What aspects of AI, I would say, environmental impact deserve more attention? Where is there confusion? When you talk to people about this, or is it a blind spot? What's your take on these questions?
That's super interesting. And I actually don't hear enough of also the challenges that AI bring to sustainability. So let's maybe spend a couple of words about that, because a significant portion of my work is also talking with sustainability leaders just about that. Like, what is the environmental impact or the energy consumption impact of using AI? And the differences are huge. Like, between different models, are using large language models, are using small language models. It's not just energy consumption, it's also water usage and the water footprint. So that's can be significant. And sustainability leaders need to understand that all of that is entering their balance sheet, if you will. So my plea would be, or my recommendation would be, that sustainability leaders have to get a seat at the table when corporate AI strategy is discussed, because it's just a must. There is, of course,
Because you think that today the perception that people don't realize, how much
Yeah.
what's the impact and how much energy it requests potentially. Like for example, a request on ChatGPT is like 10 times more consuming than a search on Google. I mean, it's difficult, depends on the model, depends on what you use, but
Yeah.
roughly it's much more. The energy consumption is much higher, and the knowledge of this is not widespread.
Yeah, I would think so. I would think that like imagine the consequences of your technology decisions, right? And again, it's not just energy, it's also water. That you can see different statistics. I haven't like really checked them myself, like how solid they are, but there are also like stats out there saying a GPT conversation that is that long would require like half a liter of water, to in the whole process. Um, the impacts are there, and we need to be more transparent, and we need to be have more intentful, more intentional when it comes to what are we using AI for? Why are we using AI, and what for? And we're having that very lively discussion within Salesforce as well. Like we're like also obviously a designer and a producer of AI services, and that's like one of the fields of tension that we have within our company as well. Of course, we want to deliver that top-notch services to our customers. We want to be innovative. We want to also, at the end, we're a listed at stock exchange. Like revenue is also a KPI of our company. On the other hand, sustainability has been elevated to a core company value in 21, which is like a big deal in this house because it's like a corporate imperative to employees, to how we do investments, to what we're focusing on. So how do you navigate between these two poles on a continuum, if you will? And there's one approach that we found when it comes to what kind of AI services and how we develop these services. There's a set of principles that we gave ourselves. One of them is sustainability, and when you like unfold what's within that principle of sustainability, it says that, for example, you need to use a right-sized model. Like right-sized model means small language model can cut it for a specific task and function. You don't need a large language model for a simple task that knows like the strain with the entirety of the internet. This not doesn't make sense, right? It's because it carries a backpack of too much energy during the training of the processing. Um, so and the second would be like efficient hardware, hosting your data centers with those large language models, with the AI workloads and low carbon geographical regions. And there are like more guidelines around that. And this is how we try to also give guidelines to ourselves and also guardrails to ourselves. And within that guardrails, people can be innovative. That is what we've seen like with our AI engineers as well, where they came up with models that were super efficient because they're not large language models, but small language models and still are very powerful.
Mm.
So that is how I think we should shift the conversation. So again, why are you using AI and under which circumstances? And if sustainability is an aspect of that, you'll find ways to do that in a more efficient manner, I'm sure.
And that's how you apply, that's your policy at Salesforce. This is what you call the right sized models, kind of thing. Like try to get your engineers working on the most optimized solution. Like just to understand, how how deep you go on this internally, and how do you explain this also, I guess, to your clients.
Yeah, well, it really goes down to the product level that it is a must for a product to adhere to these guidelines, right? So small language models or large language models is now we see a bit that shift in some parts of the industry as well. Um, and it's not just that we're using it ourselves because we also, like you mentioned that when you talked about COP, right? It's not what a single company does. It's about like what we can do also to help move the market a little bit and also policymakers, quite frankly. That's why we also package these kind of um, principles and call it sustainable AI development principles into a paper that we call our policy principles for sustainable AI. We're promoting these to policymakers, to associations, to customers, and basically that's a paper that includes two different sections. One is how can you manage and measure the environmental impact of AI? So claiming also for the disclosure of training emissions, so what is the backpack of CO2 equivalents that comes with that AI,
Hmm.
And the second thing is like, how can you use AI for the right reasons? Like, how can you increase the handprint of the activities that you supercharge with AI?
And do you have examples of how some of these AI agents, can be leveraged specifically, to benefit corporate sustainability efforts?
Yeah, we had just in Davos one very prominent example where colleagues of mine were working with Producers Trust in India, which is kind of seek to connect farmers to that are embarking on more regenerative farming to larger corporations and actually can get their well their products sold better. And so what we do there is that these farmers are getting more access to the right network to position their products and also get in return more and more information on how to better work their ground, for example, in terms of weather forecasting or tips and tricks on using nutritions or not using nutritions. And we do that with the help of agents actually, where farmers can connect to very easily to a bot that is driven by an agent and place data both ways. So that is like the scale of that is massive, and that is what I have in mind. And um, about agents, what could be the democratization aspect? So democratization meaning how can you make that high end technology work for individuals or for companies that are not big corporates. I think that is something that we will need to consider as well, not just like viewing the productivity of the bigger corporates is also important, of course. And at the same time, how can we use that for good as well? That is what another set of my colleagues actually drive in the context of accelerators. So we work a lot with ecopreneurs as well. First, in the first years, very much in the climate context. Now increasingly more in the nature context as well.
Mm-hmm.
Um, on how they can leverage this kind of AI to drive their causes in NGO.
Well, a lot of new things coming in. And how does it impact your teams and the skills? How do you see sustainability teams evolving in terms of, competency, skills, and also the organization structure?
That's super interesting because there are two emerging patterns that I see within Salesforce, but then also with customers of ours. So maybe talking about the organization first, and uh, that's tying to what I mentioned in the beginning. And I really love to talk about this because it's a journey like almost everyone can relate to, where sustainability started as like a one man or one woman show somewhere in the organization. It's a project or a small team, and then it starts to evolve into a larger team. Maybe it's an own vertical in the company. And what now happened, at least in the last year, I had many conversations where I didn't meet only the chief sustainability officers, but at the same table were um, a person from finance, a person from operations, a person from IT and technology, all about data and integration. So sustainability now proliferates into all of the different departments that are that matter in an organization. And the next step will be that's not going to become a horizontal, but really a diagonal, if you will, because it's crossing all different departments or all different horizontals, um, or all different verticals, and it's going from the engineer to the CEO. It's actually crossing all different hierarchical levels as well, and that's what's very very exciting to see. And I bet that the leading companies in the near future are those that, if we talk corporate levels, are those companies that will unite digital and that sustainable transformation. Now to your first question, the first part
Hmm.
of the question, like what is the skill set and the role that I see emerge? Um, I would say like the coolest stuff that I see is the role of the sustainability technologist, and I've specific people in mind in my own company people that maybe studied sustainability management, went out there, worked in the field, and said, "I'm missing something, right? I'm missing the depth on. I know everything about the problem space that I want to solve within sustainability, but I need more tools for the solution space. I need to understand data and software infrastructure and whatnot." So they went back to school and came back with a degree then in data science, for example. Shout out to Nick and Gordon and Jason. And they are now part of our sustainability management team. They know all about sustainability, but then also they are able to like build these kind of AI agents that are helping them to drive their own data management activities, their carbon accounting activities, and that is something that I see emerge. That love marriage between sustainability and technology in a single role. I think that is going to be one of the exciting new jobs going forward that help bring sustainability into the rest of the company.
Okay, so you see some kind of merger coming in, like where you can use product carbon footprint data in CRM systems, and so this is really updating the product.
Yeah, totally. I mean, that's like the ultimate goal, right? Starting with like I call it the dry stuff, right? Data ingestion, carbon accounting, reporting. Next level then is what we covered earlier on performance management, and like the third step in the three-step maturity journey, if you will. That's really embedding all of that in the business. Like imagine you are, I don't know, you are a an e-commerce company, or you're selling stuff on the web, right? And you'd like to enable your customers to buy the least carbon heavy version of a product, for example. So it would be great to just have the data and give that and empower and enable your customers to make the right or the best decision in the circumstance. You really need to have the data ready. Or think about finance, and you want to make the best decision in terms of investments. So you need to embed not only carbon, but then going on, like looking to the future, also the social cost of to nature into everything you wanna invest in, and you need that data to make a better decision. So that's going to be needed everywhere. And yeah, these kind of folks that understand both data and sustainability data, they can help you get there.
Well, when we look at what most of the companies have been talking to try to do when it comes to sustainability and measuring their impact, you can see that they have kind of an approach in three points. The first point would be to have kind of a ambitious net zero trajectory to reduce the footprint of their operations. Then it would be about optimizing and reducing the footprint of the cloud, usually cloud and infrastructure, green IT. And in the end, it's about developing some kind of solutions to have a positive handprint, for the best players, and extend this positive impact to all their customers. That's the ambitious one. Do you think this is it what you see happening at your clients? I would like to understand, how the different clients that you have, the companies that you see frame things, looking forward. What are their priorities?
The journey looks very similar to most of the companies and most of the customers we work with. It's and it's the most difficult step is the first one, right? Getting your data in shape, like understanding what kind of data do I need to actually assess my sustainability performance. It's not just like even with only carbon, right? It can be very complex when you talk about scope 3 and you have like a huge supply chain. We talked about moving from spend-based to primary data. That's complex stuff. And you need to have your technology in place. You need to have your processes in place. You need to have your people in place that understand all of these. That's the very first step. And that enables everything that comes after that. And it's again probably the driest steps of all of this. It's not much fun. It's hard work, right? But then companies that did this exercise, that build this single source of truth for sustainability data, that have trust in the data in terms of we can audit it and we can prove that this data is solid and it's accurate. They build on top that higher level or higher value services I just mentioned, like make better decisions about your own sustainability, like corrective actions, the impact of those actions, like the whole performance management aspect. Then the third one was that we touched on previously, like how can we embed all of that in our business? Like in business speak, that would be you would move from risk to value, and you would move from just bottom line efficiencies, like doing sustainability management better and quicker, towards sustainability is a key aspect on how you can generate revenue, right?
Hmm.
That's completely different approach to the perception of sustainability and the value sustainability has in the company. And yeah, as I said, it is a gradual transformation, and companies that'll transform faster,
Hmm.
they'll have an advantage in the
Do you
marketplace.
have a couple of examples, just one, to understand how to apply this, and also what are the main hurdles, the main challenges when it comes to actually implementing this, and also the key success factors that you can observe?
Yeah. So take for example a manufacturing company that we work with. Like if you're if you're considering sustainability um, management also as a factor in being more efficient, they're in the sustainability business for like 15 years, right? Because they always want to understand how can we make our production processes leaner? How can we do that with less energy? How can we save that energy? How can we use every output of a process to make it an input to a new process? Think about circularity, right? So they're in that business for a very long time already with their production size, etc. So what sales was added to it was some even more data prone management aspect, like integrate all of the different data sources that they have and bring it into a single cockpit, because that wasn't there before. So they would have like typical swivel sharing, difficult different applications they would work in, and data wasn't really like lining up to one another. And that is what we added on top. And what they made out of it was, okay, they are even still, as a very mature company, they found new ways to further decrease the energy usage that they have, and increase the productivity in it. That's on the production side. And then also marrying all the data that they had about the life cycle of the products and the impacts and the footprints that came with it, incentivizing their sales to focus on those products that are um, there's nothing like more sustainable, but they don't have a lesser footprint than others,
Hmm.
because that is what you can do then with this data. You can bring it into your CRM, and you can say incentivize your sellers to focus on those products that have a better or lower footprint, and that's how we can marry that, right? Marry business with sustainability.
Yeah, marrying business and sustainability. Let's go to the end by dreaming a little bit. We've hosted several guests in this podcast to discuss the evolution of business models overall, and maybe also around the concept of regenerative kind of a utopia, which is a future where companies generate more positive effects than negative ones. Still a bit remote, but yeah, that's a target. And currently, we can say, I don't know, that's a figure, but less than 0.1% of companies kind of achieve this, depending on how you measure it. But it remains a kind of a beautiful aspiration, I guess. Looking ahead, can technology become an ally in achieving regenerative business models, according to you, and which is where companies create more positive than negative impacts? What's your vision? What's the goal? What's your vision for this transformation? Looking at the technological angle.
I would say in the end, like technology is still a set of tools that humans can use to shape the world around them, right? It's the tools that we can use. And even the best technologies can cause great harm if we use it the wrong way for the wrong reasons. Like think about again, like a super efficient AI, where you say, cool, cool, we have efficiency gains, hooray, hooray. And then it ends up in these efficiency gains are eaten up by an even overuse of that AI, so that you actually get a rebound effect. Like, why are you using AI, or any technology for that matter? And that is what I'd say. Like, my vision, my personal utopia would be that we use technology with intent, the right way, for the right reasons. Meaning, and what is required for that, right? What is required for using technology the best way we can? I think that is like that is not a technology discussion. It is more a discussion about humans again. About it's like actually drifts into a philosophical discussion. Like, I think that we need to understand that not just economy, but also all of us within the economy are embedded in nature, not work like we are part of nature. And if we accept that, and if we accept the consequences of that, and that we need to deal with great care when we take nature's resources and ecosystem services, I think we'll make better decisions within companies, and we also will make better decisions on what kind of technologies we are going to develop and how we're going to use them. Um, we're going to, like, if we accept that paradigm, right, business and humans as a part of nature, we also will shift, I would hope, um, our time horizons, like from quarters and fiscal years and election cycles towards, uh, decades and
Mm.
generations. Like, make calls, make decisions that you can still be proud of in 10 years, and you can still proud of in front of your kids. And that's basically the last one. Like, if I would have that magic wand, I would really wish that we as businesses, as an economy, but then ultimately as every individual human, act with integrity and empathy, and for our whole species.
Mm.
And so, like, having that safe and just transition, as Rockström always puts it.
What's your view on the biggest hurdle within the corporation structures that's preventing this from happening more often? Because you say that we have a lot of human beings, working in corporations. It's only human beings that are, when they know about these issues, that are worried and want to do something good, but the end result usually is not aligned with that. Where do you see the biggest structural hurdle to be lifted? And that goes also with my last question, which is, if you had a reboot button in front of you, what would it do?
That's the biggest question of all, right? What I would reboot is really the perception of and the concept of we. Who is we? How big is our definition of we? Is we just my own family? Is it just my own tribe? Is it just my company? Is it just my region? You know? And the bigger our concept of we is, and that would be the reboot button, right? Hitting the reboot button, like, we includes not just Steffen, not just Frankfurt, not just Salesforce, not just EU. It would include us as a global community. Bit cheesy, but that is what I would wish for the reboot button to do. And I think that is also one of the biggest hurdles. If we would bring the understanding that the impacts, good and bad, that we would have go far beyond our own circle, our own realm. They impact other people in other places as much as they impact our own. Um, that'll lead to different set of decisions, I think. And on an individual level, like, from my personal experience, I can say that the better you're able to bring sustainability, or your strive for work that's meaningful into your day job, and not just regarding it like two different lives to live. Like,
Mm.
I have my corporate life and I have my life where I go out in nature and live like a sustainable life. Like, that's not adding up.
Mm-hmm.
And that's driving like a lot of cognitive dissonance on a personal level as well. And the better you're able to bring that together, you're not like doing good for yourself, but you're also doing good for the companies that you work for. And ultimately, and that's what I'm seeing now talking from within Salesforce. So more people you have that care about a positive impact of their job, it'll have a systemic impact on the whole organization. Like this, it's going to change the gravity of specific topics and people. It does make a difference if you like working besides someone who has like 15 years at United Nations Environmental Program under his belt, right? And like it's a forestry background and thinks about the things that we do at Salesforce a completely different way, right? It changes that gravity, and that's what I would wish for, well, for every corporation and also for every employee in that corporation.
Well, thanks a lot for these beautiful insights. Thanks a lot, Steffen. It was great talking to
Thank
you.
you. Thanks for having me.
Okay.